confusion about when we start. We were first starting the show. It was going to be at 11 tonight, but then I found out that I was going to have access to our amazing, lovely bookshelf. Look behind me. This is an amazing, amazing thing, this bookshelf. It is just an amazing, amazing wonder of creation. So I wanted to have the bookshelf, and then there was some confusion that thought we were going to start at 8 p.m. because I put it in the YouTube thing wrong, but here we are at 7 p.m. So everyone who's here, thank you for being here. Everyone who is coming on in, thank you for coming on in. Nothing gets in our way. We keep doing stuff. YouTube is now allowing me to upload videos, it seems. It still hasn't let the ones I uploaded on Sunday go through, whatever. So YouTube is not getting in our way. We are uploading videos. We do have unnamed diet beverage in the house. There you go. And I'm pouring the unnamed diet beverage. And I'm so glad that all of you are here. I'm going to have a great conversation with all of you tonight. Welcome, 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 welcome. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. We always want to hit the notifications bell. That way you get informed, especially on times like this when it's confusing about when we start. First it's 11, then it's 8, then it's 7, or then it was 7, or we're starting. Here we are. I'm not going anywhere. Happy Saturday to everybody. Happy, happy Saturday. So glad to be able to talk with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Glad that you're here. Glad that I have unnamed diet beverage. Glad that I had a day to just chill and work on some stuff. Some great developments are in the works. I can't say too much about it until it's over. But some very, very, very good developments are in the works. Some very, very good events are going to be taking place very soon. You probably won't be hearing much from me next week. But afterwards, you'll be hearing quite a bit from me. But next week is going to be a slow week for me in terms of social media because a lot of good things are happening. A lot of very, very good things are happening. A lot of good things happening, but not a lot on social media. So be sure to tune in. There'll be some great stuff that'll be happening. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Glad you all are here. Plenty to talk about. We'll talk about the new domestic terrorism legislation or agenda. It's not legislation, but agenda, that's going on. We'll talk about, for example, we'll talk about the Iranian elections that just happened. We'll talk about the Putin-Biden summit. We'll talk about China a little bit. So yeah, that's, the opening remarks should be pretty good tonight, pretty chill. And then after the opening remarks, we do our roll call where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, after I've called you out as I see you, after I've done my opening remarks, before that, then the rest of the show is just super chats. And I just answer your super chat questions for the rest of the show. So be sure to send some super chats in because that's how the second half of the show happens. The second half of the show is me giving super chat question answers off the top of my head. And sometimes the super chat questions are deeply political. They are questions about politics and world events and obscure history. Often I can just spout off the top of my head and answer it. Sometimes I just will have to say I don't know because there are some things that I do not know. I do not know everything, as shocking as that may be for some of you to believe. But sometimes people ask me just random stuff about my life, random stuff about politics, movies, baseball, or whatever. Alrighty. Jose Maria Sasan, CPC. All right. First super chat. Jose Maria Sasan, CPC, People's War. We can talk about that. Yeah, I mean, that's basically how the show works, is that I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call, and we find out who's here. On top of that, we then, from there, have me answer the super chats. And that's how we roll here. And after that, we're done. So that's how the show goes. But the show goes as long as you want. I've got plenty of unnamed diet beverage. I am sitting here in front of our amazing bookshelf that we don't always have. We don't always have this bookshelf. This bookshelf is a real good thing. And then on top of that, the night is young. The sun is not even down yet. So we can go for a while tonight. We'll see how it goes, right? It's all up to you. So why don't I first get into my opening remarks, and then I'll be writing the super chats down as they come in. And then from there, we answer your super chat questions. And then we're done. Operation Uphold Democracy. Then we're done. So there you go. All right, folks. So it's always important to step back for a minute. Writing it down. Always important to step back for a minute and talk about our overall worldview. You should never assume that your audience knows anything. I know many of you listening to this are very, very well informed. You know all about Marxism. You know about the evils of capitalism. You know all about, dialectical and historical materialism, fusion energy. You know all about this stuff. But there are some people who are listening and don't know about it. Cromwell, Robespierre. There's some people watching here who don't know anything about it. And that's fine. How would you know anything about what we talk on here about if you grew up in the United States? I learned in school that communism is when everyone gets paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work. And it doesn't work, because why would you do any work, right? My teacher told us that communism is everyone in the class getting a C, right? No one fails, no one gets an A, everyone gets a C. That's communism. That's what I was taught in American public schools about what communism is. And so, according to the American political system, that's what you would know. That is what you would know. 7-day plan to invade West Germany. That's what you would know, right? No one knows anything. We can't count on, the U.S. education system. We can't count on American media to teach people about this stuff. Marxist concept, overproduction. We can't count on them to teach this. So if you know nothing about socialism or communism, that's not your fault. And no one thinks less of you because of that, right? If you are very new to understanding all of this, that's fine. The CIA takes orders from the Council on Foreign Relations. All right, CIA, CFR. Alrighty. It's not your fault. And we communists, we have to be very careful in how we talk about things. I don't know if people are familiar with the expression inside baseball. Right? Inside baseball. Now, I heard this term 5 or 6 years ago. Someone talked about inside baseball. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant term. All right, China social credit. I thought it was a brilliant term. So, because it immediately reminded me of my grandfather. I had a grandfather. He was a salesman. He was from Missouri. And he loved baseball. He really loved baseball. In fact, he had a nickname for me when I was a kid. He used to call me Slats, S-L-A-T-S. I did not know what slats meant, but apparently this was a famous baseball player that had existed 30, 40, 50 years before I was born. He used to call me Slats because I was kind of skinny when I was a kid. That was a reference to a famous baseball player. He loved baseball. And if you put my grandfather, huge baseball fan, into the room with another huge baseball fan, they would sit there and start talking about very obscure rules, very obscure players, very obscure moves and possibilities. And pretty soon, if you were not a baseball fan, if you were not, part of this little subculture that understood intimately all the rules of baseball, you would have no idea what they were talking about. Great religious. You would have no clue what they were talking about. You would just be you would have no idea what they were talking about. Because they're part of this little subculture of people that are really into baseball, have studied the history of baseball, who know, intricate details, the kind of people that could be lawyers in baseball court. And when they start talking about baseball, when my grandfather and another baseball fan would start talking about baseball, I'd have no idea what they were talking about. I would just have no idea what they were talking about. And a lot of times, let's be real, if you put me or, one of my good buddies in a room with a Trotskyite or an anarchist or a Maoist, and we sit there, and pretty soon it's the same experience to anybody who's not part of that. It's just like me sitting in the room and watching my grandfather talk about baseball, right? I had no idea what he was talking about, right? Because I'm not part of that intricate little subculture around baseball. And a lot of times when communists argue with each other, when communists talk to each other people look on and they hear it and they think, what the hell are they talking about? What the hell are they talking about? And that's not good. That is absolutely, positively not good. We don't want to appear that way to people. If we are serious about making the United States a socialist country, it is very important that we do not come across as inside baseball. Now, there are times where it's necessary to be able to communicate your ideas. It's necessary to engage in polemics and disagreements and explain how your politics are different than other people's politics. That's important. It's important to know the difference between a Trotskyite and a genuine Marxist-Leninist. It is important to know the difference between what anarchists advocate and what social democrats advocate and what genuine socialists and communists and revolutionaries advocate. It's important to know these differences. And the danger is that often in the name of not getting into inside baseball, and this is a mistake that we can make, in the name of not getting obscure, in the name of being accessible or being popular, right? We can make the other extreme. And we can say, you know what, it doesn't matter. Who cares what the difference between an anarchist and a social democrat is? Who cares what the difference between Trotsky and Stalin was? Who cares what the difference between BreadTube and real Marxism is? Who cares, right? Oh, we're all in the movement. We're all good pals. We all go to the same protests. Who cares about this stuff? Kucinich for mayor. Who cares? And that is very dangerous as well. It's important to know the difference. It's important to be able to tell the difference between revolutionary trends and revolutionary currents. But at the same time, these differences have to be communicated in a coherent and clear way that explains to the masses not only very clearly what the difference is, but also explains why it matters. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? You have to be able to explain why it matters, and then you have to be able to explain the differences. And that can be very important. And this is the danger. All the time, I see Trotskyites and Maoists and anarchists who are having fights and using buzzwords and referring to all kinds of things. And they often, one classic thing I'll see people use acronyms, assuming that the audience knows what the acronyms mean. Right? Progressive wokeness, right? Assuming that the audience knows what the acronyms mean when they don't. And that's awful. That's an awful thing to do. And so you'll get people that are too obscure. And then on top of that, you'll get people that are too broad, and they just say, oh, in the name of not being obscure, none of this stuff matters. Hey, we're all in the movement, man. No, we're not all in the movement. That's been made abundantly clear to me over the past 2 years. It's been made abundantly clear to me that these people that are out there talking about being woke, they are not my friends. They have made that very abundantly clear to me. 2000 anti-war movement. All right. They have made that abundantly clear to me. That's been made abundantly clear to me, right? There are big differences between the woke crowd, all right? Writing them down, folks. I saw them. There are big differences between the woke crowd and genuine socialists and revolutionaries. And we have to be able to be clear about what those differences are. We have to be able to explain that because it matters. It really, really matters. If you look at what the left is doing, if you look at what the so-called left is doing, the role that the so-called woke left is playing now, it's not a good one. It's not a good role, right? I mean, the role that most people speaking in the name of leftism, socialism, and Marxism in the United States are playing is not a good role. I mean, the people on the right that oppose them are certainly not playing a good role. No one denies that, right? I mean, there's no one promoting white supremacism or racism or hostility to people or advocating discrimination against people on the basis of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. People advocating that we have some kind of theocratic religious government. People, hating immigrants. No one supports that. Well, plenty of people do actually, but no genuine Marxist supports that. So we're against the right, no question about it. But we have to be clear that the woke crowd, that woke current, they're not good either. They're not playing a good role either. And they view us, those of us who are opposed to war, those of us who believe that growth is a good thing and want to see living standards rise, those of us who think that we want a better society and that a society where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not profits is ideal. They view us as the enemy. So it's important that we make clear the difference between ourselves and the woke left, but we have to do it in a way that makes sense to people and doesn't sound like a bunch of crazy inside baseball. What do we got here? Woke left, almost exclusively Western, right? Woke left. And why is this happening? Why is this conversation even necessary, right? When I was a kid, nobody in this country, except for a very small minority, was ever talking about Marxism. Everyone thought capitalism was fine. Everyone said, if you don't like it here, why don't you move to some other country? Don't fix it if it ain't broke. People did not know any of this stuff. So, I grew up in a very small town, a very conservative town. No one cared about any of this. And most of the United States was bitterly pro-communist, pro-capitalist, bitterly anti-communist. Everyone thought the United States was the greatest country in the world, and if you didn't think that, you should move to another country. But now we are in a societal-wide crisis, right? The election of Donald Trump and the chaos that surrounded his presidency and the January 6th Capitol riot was all a culmination of a number of big trends in the United States. There is fighting among the ruling elite in the United States. There is a political crisis spawned by an economic crisis taking place in the United States. And that's why these conversations are relevant. When times are good, when the living standards are rising, when the economy is good, people don't talk about this stuff because they just live their lives and they enjoy life. But because of a big, big crisis in society, suddenly, people are looking for answers. And racist demagogues are giving answers. And synthetic left phonies are giving answers. And those of us who maintain the tradition, scientific socialism, the tradition that raised millions of people out of poverty around the world, the tradition that defeated the Nazis, the tradition that invented space travel, the tradition that built a global anti-fascist movement, the tradition that was marching for civil rights long before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those of us who are from that current, we offer a different answer. And people are looking for answers, and they are looking for answers, and some people will turn to the far right for answers. Some people will turn to the fake left for answers. But those answers from the far right and from the fake left will not solve the crisis. Only we can solve the crisis. So we must be able to clearly articulate why the crisis is happening, number one. Thank you, Andy. I'm glad you liked it. I'll write that down. We have to be able to articulate, number one, why the crisis is happening. And then number two, we have to be able to articulate the revolutionary way out of the crisis. Thank you, Herb Bryant, for your super chat. Much appreciated. We have to be able to articulate the way out. The way out. We have to be able to articulate that. So why is the crisis happening? Well, the crisis is happening for this reason. We live under a system called capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit. Under capitalism, food is not produced so people can eat it. Food is produced so they can make money from it. Under capitalism, housing is not built so people can, have a place to live. Housing is built so landlords and banks can make money from it. Production is organized for sellability, not for usability. I can think of about 3 very good examples of production for sellability, production for profit, rather than production for use. Example number 1. At many restaurants in New York City, at the end of the night, they have a lot of leftover food. So what do they do with this leftover food from the restaurant? Well, according to health department regulations, if it is expired or if it's not going to be, they throw it away. They throw it away. They throw it in the garbage. But what do they do after they put it in the garbage? They take motor oil and pour motor oil all over it. Why? That's so no homeless person can take it out of the garbage and eat it. Now, what rational sense does this make? Well, especially if you're in a specific neighborhood. This probably doesn't happen very much in Manhattan, but if you're in Brooklyn, if you're in Queens, if you're in a specific neighborhood in New York City, it's very likely that a homeless person will come and take it out of the garbage. And that homeless person very well might be able to get a couple dollars together and buy it from you. But if they can get it out of the garbage for free, they are not going to buy it from you. So restaurant owners throughout New York City routinely pour motor oil on the leftover hamburger buns and the leftover vegetables and the leftover food before they put it in the garbage. Because they didn't make that food so people could eat it. They made it so people could sell it. And if people eat it out of the garbage and don't buy it from them, they're losing money. This is production organized for profit, not production organized for public good. Another great example. I went to the movies. A long time ago, I was in college, I went to the movies. I was naive. I did not know that sodas at the movies, unnamed diet beverage, as we like to joke about on here, sodas at the movies are a little overpriced. So I went into the movie, went to the refreshment stand, I said, I'll like a diet, bleep. And they got a little cup, they put some ice in it, they went to the fountain, filled it up for me, put it there in front of me, and they said that'll be $5.50. $5.50 for a little cup of soda with ice in it. I did not have $5.50 left over in my wallet. And I thought, that is a ridiculous price. And I said, well, I don't have $5.50. So the woman behind the counter said, oh, sorry. Took the lid off the soda, poured it out, and threw it into the garbage. Now, what sense does that make? If she had just given it to me, they would have had exactly the same amount. But they didn't make that soda so I could drink it. They made that soda in order to make money. Production organized for profit, not production for social use. That's capitalism. Capitalism is production organized for profit. Third great example. My good friend, Dakota Lilly, Venezuela Solidarity activist, was in Union Square one day in the freezing cold, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. He was in Union Square, and it was Union Square, and there was a Burlington coat factory. There's a couple other stores, in Union Square. I don't think it was Burlington Coat Factory. I think it was another store was doing this. But he discovered in a dumpster all kinds of winter coats that were thrown into the dumpster because they couldn't be sold, right? There are non-Western anarchists. Okay. Non-Western anarchists. But before this store, I don't think it was Burlington Coat Factory. I think it was another store. Right? I actually do think it was another store. There's a lot of stores around the Union Square area. Before this store threw these winter coats away, they had taken a knife to them and cut them up. Why? So no homeless person could take them out of the garbage. It's freezing cold. Wintertime, you're throwing away a bunch of winter coats you can't sell. Before you throw them away, you got to cut them into pieces. Why? Because someone could take them out of the garbage and use it, right? This is production for profit, and that is capitalism. Friedrich Engels, the collaborator, close collaborator with Karl Marx, he very famously called it, this is the way he articulated it. He says that under capitalism, the means of production function only as preliminary transformation into capital. Meaning, stuff gets produced under capitalism so profits can be made from it. Preliminary transformation into capital. Under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Mao Zedong, who was a mass organizer, much more of a populist, and he said, capitalism is a system of profits in command. Profits in command. That is capitalism. And we live under a system of profits in command. And, I will add, under capitalism, you end up with two great hostile camps, two classes. Those who live by working and those who live by owning. Those who live by working have to sell their labor power to the capitalists. Those of us who do not own big factories, own oil wells, own big box stores, all right, capitalism, death toll. Own big box stores. Those of us who do not own, airlines, means of communication. Those of us who do not own huge centers of economic power have to sell our labor power to those who do. Those who control the means of production are called the capitalists. And they're the ones who organize production in order to enhance their own profits. That's why they're called capitalists, right? They have capital, and the means of production are organized for them to hire people, exploit their labor, and make profits. The rest of us are called the working class, the proletariat, those of us with nothing to lose but our chains and a whole wide world to win. Those of us who, instead of owning for a living, work for a living. We sell our labor power to a capitalist. And these are the two classes. And the interests of the capitalist and the worker are contrary. The capitalist wants to pay the worker as little as he can get away with in order to maximize his profits. The worker wants to get paid as much as he possibly can to maximize his own living standard and his wages. They have contrary interests. So the working class has formed labor unions, combinations, trade unions, the labor movement, to fight for their interests against the capitalists. And the capitalists frequently use the government to suppress the labor movement. And this is capitalism. And capitalism is highly unstable. Capitalism, first of all, requires that capitalist industries be in a state of constant expansion. The general law of capitalist accumulation. When the capitalist gets his profits, he can't just sit back and go, all right, I've got my profits. No, he must reinvest those profits to turn them into more profits. And then he must reinvest those profits to turn them into bigger profits. If the capitalist stops expanding, he dies. The general law of capitalist accumulation. The idea that capitalist enterprises function on the basis of expand or die. If they stop expanding, they die. That is the basis of the capitalist mode of production, the general law of capitalist accumulation, until you get a monopoly. Until enough corporations have died, and after enough corporations have died, that you have a monopoly, then you get what is called monopolistic stagnation. And monopolistic stagnation takes place, and all of a sudden, there's no competitors anymore, and the capitalist enterprise at the center has no reason to expand any longer. And the economy comes to a grinding halt. And that's why there are all kinds of mechanisms that have been set up by the government to prevent monopolies. For example, right, movie theaters cannot be owned by movie studios. Why? Because if you are a movie studio that makes movies, you would only, and you owned a movie theater, your movie theater would only show your movies. Why would you want to show somebody else's movies and help the competition? And pretty soon, people would only be watching your movies and you would have a monopoly. And so there is a law that says if you own a movie studio, you cannot own a movie theater. If you own a movie theater, you cannot own a movie studio. There you go. Another great example, right? I work in media. I own 0 stocks. I do not own any stocks. And why can't I own any stocks? Well, probably wouldn't make a big difference in my case, but if I worked for the Wall Street Journal and I owned stock in Coca-Cola, I could write articles in the Wall Street Journal saying Coca-Cola's stock is doing pretty well. And people would read all of this, and as a result, they would go buy Coca-Cola, and the value of my stock would increase. And I would be using my power in the media to aid my stock ownership. Well, they have laws against this, that if you work in media, you are not allowed to own stocks, right? There's a reason for this, right? Because it leads to monopolism. However, capitalism still has a natural tendency toward monopoly, right? Capital continues to concentrate in the hands of a few, right? Expand or die. You have the general law of capitalist accumulation. Corporations get bigger or they go out of business. And so eventually you get monopolies, right? And this is the problem that capitalism develops, that there is, constantly these problems. Now, then, of course, you have the problem of overproduction, where the capitalist is always looking to produce as many goods as he possibly can, but pay as little as he possibly can to produce them. He wants to pay the worker as little as he can possibly get away with. So the capitalist is constantly developing mechanisms through which to eliminate the worker from production, right? He replaces human labor with machines, for example. He drives wages down. He de-skills the jobs that he does have. Instead of having someone who has to go through years of training, you just have a button pusher who pushes the button. How many short order cooks are there in the 21st century? That used to be a very good paying job. People would be short order cooks. Well, nowadays, if you go to McDonald's, you are eating a hamburger that is produced on an assembly line. It's just like a factory, right? There are factories, you have the assembly line, boom, 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 they make a car. McDonald's, it's a food assembly line. No short order cooks necessary, right? This is what the capitalist does. And as a result, the workers at McDonald's are far more easily replaceable, so you can get away with paying them a lot less, right? This is how the capitalist works. But the problem is, as the capitalist eliminates the worker from production, as the capitalist seeks to maximize his own profits by increasing technology and producing goods more and more efficiently, pretty soon the worker cannot buy back the product that he produces. Pretty soon the workers who've had their wages go down and down and down can't buy back the products. And pretty soon the market is glutted with products that cannot be sold. And the economy comes to a grinding halt because the worker is also the consumer. And this tendency to drive down the worker's wages by maximizing technology, it tends to lead to prolonged economic crises. And in the history of capitalism, the biggest economic crises come after the biggest leaps in technology. World War I came after many great technological inventions. The Great Depression of the 1930s that led ultimately to World War II came after Henry Ford and his innovations in the assembly line. During the 1920s, they said Henry Ford has defeated Karl Marx. It was all over the newspaper. Ford has defeated Marx because Henry Ford had figured out this new efficient way of capitalism. He'd invented assembly line production, and he was paying his workers certain wages, and he had used Taylorism, and Henry Ford had made a capitalism that wouldn't have crises of overproduction. Well, that was a myth. The Great Depression happened because whenever there is a leap in efficiency, it's not too long before you have a crisis of overproduction. And what we are living in now is a huge global crisis of overproduction because of the computer revolution. Computer technology has advanced the means of production and made them so much more efficient than ever before in history, 3D printers, right? Just 3D printers. Things just come out, right? Drones, artificial intelligence. The computer revolution has taken human productivity to far greater levels than ever before. And as a result of that, there is less need for workers at the assembly line than ever before. And this is the problem that we are facing in the 21st century. There are more people than there have ever been, and that is a good thing, because human beings are capable of great contributions to society. But under capitalism, your only value is if you can sell your labor power to a capitalist. And right now, the capitalists need fewer workers in the process of production than they've ever needed, right? They have eliminated the role of the worker for the most part. They don't need workers. They need workers less than they've ever needed them, thanks to the computer revolution. However, at the same time, there are more workers than ever before. And those workers are outcast and starving because there is no place for them in the apparatus of production. And that is the problem that we are living in. Now, it's important to be clear that 21st century capitalism is not ordinary capitalism. It's not, factory owner versus factory worker. We live in the age of what Lenin called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Imperialism is a monopoly stage of capitalism. It is when the big corporations and trusts and cartels and syndicates in the Western countries dominate the global economy and hold back development around the world. In order to maintain a monopoly for Western corporations, economic development is stopped in the developing world, right? In the formerly colonized world, the third world. Now, we're talking about Iran's election, but I'll write it down. In the formerly colonized world, people are basically driven out of being able to have economic growth and made into captive markets. Mexico. Mexico used to have lots of farmers. There used to be all kinds of farmers in Mexico. But because of NAFTA, now Mexico has seen all of its farmers, for the most part, go out of business, and they import their food from American agribusiness. That is capitalism in its monopoly stage. The giant agribusiness corporations in the United States, with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, have seized Mexico as a captive market. Mexico no longer produces its own food. It imports agribusiness products from the United States. They used to grow their own corn, used to grow their own wheat, used to grow all kinds of things. Now they import it from the United States. Haiti, similar story. Haiti used to have all kinds of farmers who grew their own food. Now they import it all from the United States. They are a captive market. When the British Empire went to India, the people of India, the people of Bangladesh, the people of similar countries and surrounding countries in Southeast Asia, they had been weaving for thousands of years. Thousands of years they had been weaving. Favorite. Thousands of years they had been weaving. But the British Empire went to India and burned down the looms and enforced them to import all of their cloth from Britain. Right? Why did what was Gandhi's crime? Do folks remember Mahatma Gandhi, the activist from India? What was he arrested for? He was arrested for boiling his own salt because the British demanded that the people of India buy their salt from British corporations. And Gandhi was getting seawater and boiling it so he could make his own salt. And that was a crime. The British Empire would not allow it, right? It violated the salt property rights of big British corporations. That's how imperialism works. It's about seizing the world as captive markets. One of the main ways imperialism functions in our time is through control of oil. Oil is the most valuable commodity, really, in the world at this time. right? If you want to go any place, you're going to go in a car, and that's oil. You're going to go in a plane, that's oil. If you have any plastic, the plastic in this pen, that's petroleum, that's oil. We have a very, very oil-based economy. And oil is dominated by a cartel of Western capitalist corporations. There are 4 companies that, if you look at the global market, there are 4 super majors that they are called: ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, and Shell Oil. They dominate the global oil markets. If you throw the French corporation Total in, that is 80% of the world's petroleum. It comes from 5 companies: Total in France, Chevron, BP, ExxonMobil, and Shell Oil. 80% of the world's oil comes from 5 companies. And if you want to get on a plane, that's oil. You want to drive a car, that's oil. Anything plastic, anything. Look through your house and look at everything that's plastic, oil. Oil is the essential commodity. And those folks who dominate the oil markets, the monopolists who dominate the oil markets, well, those folks are very, very, very powerful. This is capitalism in its monopoly stage. The rule of the world by a few ultra-rich corporations who keep the world poor so that they can stay rich. That's imperialism. That's capitalism. The world is organized to serve the profits of a few big corporations and banks based in the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy, and some other Western countries. That is imperialism. That is what imperialism is. And that is what capitalism is in our time. And if you are a Marxist, you are against this setup. Marxists advocate the alternative, which is organizing the banks, factories, and industries and major centers of economic power not to function for the profits of a few, but instead to function for the good of society. We advocate production for social use, not production for profit. Capitalism is production organized for profit. Socialism is production organized for social good. Capitalism, production for capital. Socialism, production for society. That is the difference between socialism and capitalism. No, capitalism is not when there's a gap between the rich and poor. No, socialism is not progressive income tax. No, capitalism is not people being greedy and wanting money. No, socialism is not when you and your friends start a big pencil factory together. No, capitalism is not people wanting growth and wanting to expand. No, socialism is not whenever the government does anything. There are clear definitions of these things. Capitalism is production for profit. Socialism is production for society. How is production organized? For the good of society or for the good of profiteers? That's the difference. And there is a socialist world out there. There's a rising socialist alternative to capitalism. But at this time, that socialist alternative is very much in the weaker position. And capitalism, in its monopoly stage, the global system of monopoly capitalism, imperialism rules the world. That is what Marxists believe. That is Marxism. What I just explained to you there, that understanding of the world is Marxism. In some countries like China, like Cuba, like Venezuela, production is organized for the good of society, and they are socialist countries. In other countries, in most of the world, production is organized to serve the good of the owners of means of production, and that is capitalism. And that's the fight that is taking place in the world today. The imperialist capitalists are trying to beat down and colonize and exploit the people of the developing world. And the socialist countries of the world are trying to beat back the imperialists and have economic growth and raise their people out of poverty and wipe out illiteracy and wipe out hunger and build power plants and build infrastructure and build hospitals and build schools and get beyond the nightmare of fossil fuels, develop fusion energy. The socialist countries of the world believe in growth. And there are, in most socialist countries, capitalists. There is a private sector. But that private sector is forced to work in the interests of the state. In China, the capitalists live in fear of the Chinese Communist Party. They could get the death penalty. China and Iran are the only two countries in the world that have ever given the death penalty to billionaires. The capitalists of Vietnam, the capitalists of Nicaragua, they live in fear of the Communist Party. And whether the production is carried out in the private sector or in state-run factories or in collective farms or cooperatives, socialist countries have different forms of enterprises. They have state enterprises, they have cooperative enterprises, they have private enterprises, but they're all controlled by the state. The private companies are told what they can and cannot produce. They have no property rights. They're not allowed to function according simply to the logic of the market. They must do what the Communist Party and what the leadership wants. The same for the cooperatives. The cooperatives are cooperative. They're not state-owned. But they can't just produce whatever the workers in that cooperative vote to produce. They have to produce according to what the central plan wants. And the same for the state enterprises. And 21st century socialism, the socialism of our time, is a system in which the means of production are organized to serve public good and not profits. Sometimes they're privately owned, sometimes they're cooperatives, and sometimes they're state industries, but they are forced to work in the interest of an overall central plan. The anarchy of production, the chaos of the market has been eliminated. That is the nature of socialism. And it is a repudiation of capitalism, because capitalism in the West is dying due to the built-in problems of production organized for profit, chaos, anarchy, overproduction, the general law of capitalist accumulation, monopolistic stagnation. All these things that I'm describing are why Western capitalism and imperialism are in decay, and why, despite the fact that they do not yet have the upper hand, socialism is on the rise. They told us after the fall of the Soviet Union that socialism and communism were dead, and they were wrong. They told us after the Paris Commune of 1871 was brutally suppressed that socialism and communism was dead, and they were wrong. And today, you can look at Latin America. They said after Venezuela started having problems, they said, oh, the pink tide is over. Socialism in Latin America, it's over. And they were wrong. They told us in 1978 when Deng Xiaoping launched the reform and opening up, oh, China's going to become a capitalist country. Oh, Chinese communism, give it a couple years, there won't be any more Chinese Communist Party. It'll all be privatized again. And they were wrong. And those of us who understand Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical and historical materialism, we know this. We know that the system of production for profit is outmoded. It was better than feudalism, just like feudalism was better than slavery, just like slavery was better than hunter-gatherer civilization. But its time has come. Its time has come. Capitalism is outmoded historically, and socialism is the wave of the future, and this is what we know. And this is the basis for our understanding. We socialists are part of a much bigger trend in human history. Marxism, scientific socialism, started in about 1848. The Communist Manifesto was published in 1848. Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx were forming the Communist League in Germany and going into exile. But human history is much longer than that. Human beings in our current form, Homo erectus, as they call us, have been around for at least 300,000 years. So to just reduce it to socialism and communism, it's not that simple. There is a general trend in human history called the city-building tendency. There are some human beings who are creative. There are some human beings who are optimistic. There are some human beings who are forward-thinking. And there are some human beings that are primitive, and some human beings that are barbaric, and some human beings that are pessimistic. And this applies to all kinds of things. I think all of us have different tendencies within ourselves, right? Top book recommendations. All right. Book recommendations for trots. Than ourselves, right? Some of us struggle to remain optimistic, right? Sometimes whole societies can become optimistic and enthusiastic. Sometimes whole societies can become pessimistic and hopeless and backward thinking and destructive. Sometimes there can be two axes and poles within a society. One section of the society is pushing for one optimistic way of being, and the other section of society is looking backward, right? But throughout human history, there has been a tendency. Homo sapiens, right? Homo erectus is older. We're the Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. Homo erectus was around for 3 million years before that. Thank you for the correction. Very important point. We Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. And within Homo sapiens, there is a city-building tendency and a vandal tendency. And that is the reality. We have two sides of our brain. We have two different parts of our brain. First job I ever had, I worked in a bookstore. And wow, I worked in a bookstore. The bookstore was owned by a man who was really into New Age thought. And I mean, it was bizarre because he did not belong in my town. And that bookstore went out of business after a couple years because he did not belong there. It was a deeply conservative town. But on a whim, he had set up this bookstore and it just sold like normal books. But the guy who owned it was a guy who was into health food, and he was kind of an old hippie who was kind of into New Age stuff. And he pointed out to me, he very strongly believed in space aliens and UFOs and stuff like that. I've never been able to get into that milieu of things. That's just not my cup of tea. But he pointed out to me that human beings have two brains. I mean, we have one brain, but we have two sides to our brain, right? We have a very animalistic part of our brain. We have a very, very logical and forward-thinking part of our brain. Human beings are a contradiction because all things that exist are contradictions. One must always divide into two. That is a basic law of dialectics, right? One must always divide into two, and all things that are solid must melt into air. And within the human species, there is a city-building tendency and a vandal tendency. And socialism, Marxism, 21st century socialism, scientific socialism, is the city-building tendency of our time. We are the city builders. That's why the manual for the Center for Political Innovation is called We Are City Builders. Marxism, Leninism, scientific socialism, 21st century socialism is the city-building tendency on the geopolitical stage. We are city builders. We are city builders. However, let me add that it's gotten a little bit confusing because there are a lot of people walking around these days who speak in the name of socialism, speak in the name of Marxism, talk about things that socialists and Marxists believe in, like economic justice, like racism, like anti-imperialism and such, who are not city builders. There is a vandal tendency that has usurped the name of our movement in the West, not in the developing world. Right? In the developing world, they don't have this. Right? They don't have Trotskyites for the most part in the developing world. They don't have anarchism for the most part in the developing world. They have socialism, they have anti-imperialism, they got Bolivarianism, they got Baathism. But they don't have this stuff. The Western left has been infected and contaminated by vandal tendencies that have been inserted into it. And I saw this, I learned this for the most part. The first place I learned this was in 2013 when I went to the World Festival of Youth and Students in Quito, Ecuador. And I met communists from all over the world. And you know what? They all wore suits like professional politicians. And they led organizations of millions of people. And they had seats in parliament. And they had big think tanks and organizations to promote them. You know, they all said the same thing to me. They said, Caleb, what's wrong with American communists? I said, what in the world is wrong with American communists? We've been talking to American communists for years. They never seem to be able to get their shit together. What is wrong with American communists? And I left that World Festival of Youth and Students, that global communist gathering in 2013, asking myself the same question. What is wrong with American communists? What's wrong with American communists? Well, American communists, over the course of the Cold War, were cut off from the city-building tendency. And vandal tendencies of the petty bourgeoisie and the middle class infected our movement. And I have come, I believe, to solve that problem. I have come and I have made it my mission to revive the city-building tendency in the United States of America, to repudiate the synthetic left and restore our movement to its true purpose, to make socialism city-building again. Right? That's what we are here to do. And one key aspect of socialism around the world is that it advocates policy positions. Socialists around the world do not go around explaining to people that they want a violent revolution and they want to burn it all down, right? That's not how they operate. But here in the United States, I laugh about it, you know? I jokingly laugh about this hypothetical situation, right? So, a normal American family, they're just sitting around the house one day, knock, knock, knock on the door. The door opens. Someone says, hello, I'm from the local communist and socialist organization. The person's feeling a little open-minded, and they say, oh, what does your organization believe in? They say, well, we think that you are a dirty, rotten Euro settler, and you are living on land that was stolen from the indigenous people, and you should hate yourself. And the person says, huh. By the way, tonight we are going to have a riot, and we are going to assemble and violently attack law enforcement and hopefully get several people injured and damaged property. Would you like to come? The person goes, They say, by the way, your life is too good. Your life is way too good. You need to have a lower living standard to help Mother Earth deal with global warming. Have you considered perhaps eating half of what you eat now? And have you considered telling your boss to pay you half of what he pays you now? You should really not have children, right? Humans are a cancer on Mother Earth. Now, of course, if someone were to knock on your door and say such things, why, you would slam the door in their face. Say, get out of here. Get out of here. I like my family. I like my life. I don't want you to go violently tear apart my community. I don't think I'm an evil Euro settler. I'm a working person. I'm just trying to survive. I want a better life. So get out of here. I don't want a civil war in my community. I don't want my country to be torn apart by violence and death and destruction. I don't want there to be riots. I don't want to have lower living standards. I want higher wages, not less. Karin, that's what I want. So get out of here. Get out of here. Skedaddle. Move on. And do you blame the American people for largely reacting to the synthetic left this way? Not at all. It makes perfect sense. I would react that way if someone came to my door and told me I should have less, told me I deserve to be poorer, told me they wanted to tear apart my neighborhood and my community with violence, told me they wanted to have a big civil war and rip the country apart, and that I'm an inherently evil person. I would want them out of my neighborhood. I'd say, get out of there. And I'm more tolerant of this stuff than most people are, for goodness sakes. That's not real leftism. That is not real leftism. That is not real leftism. I'm sorry. What these people walking around, the synthetic left, are not socialists. They are not communists. They are a counter gang. They're a mechanism that one faction of the ruling class has built to beat back another faction of the ruling class. There is a long-standing divide among the capitalists of the United States. The ultra-rich, the oil bankers and monopolists, the Silicon Valley fascists, are at odds with the military-industrial complex and the fracking companies. And there is a fight going on between the capitalists of the United States. As the capitalist economy of the United States is falling into ruin, the capitalists are scrambling for profits. They want the government to work for them and help them, and they want the government to screw over the other guy. And the capitalists are fighting among themselves as their system burns and crashes. And so as the capitalists are fighting amongst each other, the time has come for the working class to assert its own program. And that, mind you, is what real socialists and real communists and real revolutionaries do. They develop a program to liquidate the crisis. They bring forward a revolutionary program. A revolutionary program, a plan to liquidate the crisis. And they build a popular front around the program. They come up with a few basic measures that would improve the lives of working people. And they go to the masses of people, not advocating violence, not advocating civil war and revolution, but advocating basic programs. And they go to them with the basic program, with the agenda. And they mobilize the people around the program. And the program that we at the Center for Political Innovation, website up very soon, have developed, the 4-point plan to rescue the United States, centers around one slogan, which is, we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. No more of this libertarian nonsense. The government's best that governs least. No more of this synthetic left. We can't have the government do stuff. That's triggering and scary. No more of that. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Right? If you are a parent and your child comes to school in the wintertime without gloves on, your child comes to school and as a parent you haven't been feeding them, you can go to jail. And why do you go to jail? Because that is called criminal neglect. You have a responsibility to take care of your child, and you are not fulfilling that responsibility. So you can go to jail. And today, I charge the government of the United States with dereliction of duty, with criminal neglect. They have let the American people starve. They have let the American people go hungry. Look at Texas, how the power grid exploded in the middle of the winter, and people were freezing cold. Look at what's happening out in the pandemic destroyed how many lives because they couldn't mobilize proper relief. Look at the power plants that are exploding and falling apart. Look at the water that's poisoned with lead. They're happy to give people opioids to kill them. They're happy to set up a prison industrial complex to break people's spirits and subject them to the horror of mass incarceration. They're happy to set up a police state. But they have left the people behind. And what we need is a government of action. A government of action. That instead of protecting Wall Street, instead of protecting Silicon Valley, instead of protecting Betsy DeVos, instead of protecting the oil fracking companies, instead of protecting the military contractors, we need a government of action that will stand up and fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's the program. And a government of action would engage in four basic acts. Step number 1, a government of action would mobilize a vast reconstruction of the country. Rebuild the bridges, rebuild the highways, rebuild the schools, high-speed railway, every inch of this country have accessible Wi-Fi, totally revamp the universities of this country. It's time to rebuild the crumbling United States of America. That would be step number 1. Step number 2, In order to pay for it, our natural resources must become public property. Oil, gas, coal, timber, all the value that comes from the earth, from the land, from the soil of the United States of America should become the property of all the people. Public control of America's natural wealth. Public ownership of the natural resources. Step number 3, state monopoly on credit. No more private banking. State monopoly on credit. Get rid of the Federal Reserve. Get rid of big, huge financial institutions that lend money in order to make more money. And instead have the state, at a local, at a federal, and state level, have the lending of money be under the control of the community. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, B.T. Henry. Have the lending of money be under the control of the community. Have credit strategically assigned based on an overall plan of development. And step 4 would be enacting an economic bill of rights. In a country so wealthy, in a country with so much natural wealth, in a country with so much wealth, no one should be hungry, no one should be homeless, no one should be unemployed. People need education all the way through college. Right? An economic bill of rights. Those are the 4 steps that a government of action would engage in. Furthermore, climate change is a reality. Climate change is a reality. We know it. No use denying climate change. No use saying it's not real. It's reality. Look what's going on. Super hurricanes. Climate change is a reality. And it is the burning urgency of our time that climate change be resolved. And so in order to do that, we need to get off of fossil fuels. I'm sorry, Rockefeller. I'm sorry, BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil. I'm really sorry. Sorry, you frackers. You got to go out of business. We got to get out of a petroleum-based economy. We got to get beyond fossil fuels. And that means fusion energy. Fusion energy is the urgent necessity of the hour. And a government of action would immediately sign a treaty with Russia, with China, with Iran, with India, with South Africa, to launch a global project to create fusion energy. And a city would be built in the heartland of America. A city would be built, and all the scientists from all over the world would be flown in to this city to do nothing but work on fusion energy like mad for however long as it takes until we got fusion energy. We will build Fusion City. That is the solution to the climate crisis. Fusion City now. And anyone who tells you that the solution to the climate crisis is degrowth or everyone having less, and you listen to Greta Thunberg, you want economic growth, how dare you, how dare you. Bullshit. Fusion City now. Anyone who is a climate change fanatic should be a Fusion City fanatic. Degrowth will not solve climate change. Fusion City now. The urgent necessity of our time is a joint international effort to build one Fusion City in the center of the United States of America to lead a global effort to defeat the fossil fuel economy. Fusion City now. Fusion City now. We need to build an international science United Nations in the heartland of America and fly in a global effort to defeat fossil fuels. That is the real answer to climate change. Stolen land, Fusion City. All right, we'll write it down. And furthermore, there's a crisis on our border right now. People may not be aware, but I believe 180,000 people were apprehended at the border in the recent month. It's bad. Look at what's happening, right? Kamala Harris is down there saying, do not come, do not come. But it's bad. It's very, very bad. And what is driving people to come over the border is very, very bad economic conditions. So what needs to happen immediately? There needs to be economic development in Central America. Nicaragua, with a socialist government, Mexico, with a popular left-wing government, the United States, with all of its resources, China, with all of its skill in building infrastructure, trains, railway around the world. We need to bring all of these countries together for a joint economic development project, the Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor. Right? Sandino was the leader of the Sandinista Revolution of Nicaragua. Emil Zapata was the leader of the Mexican Revolution. And we need to carry out an economic revolution that starts in the southwest of the United States, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, goes down through Mexico, into Guatemala, into Honduras, into Nicaragua. We need to build the Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor. That is the answer to migration. So any right-winger who's like, they're taking our jobs, build a big giant wall, tell them to shut up. That's not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is trade. What's going to solve the problem is the Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor. That is the solution. Hating immigrants is not the solution. The more you terrorize immigrant families, the stronger MS-13 gets. The more children that are afraid that their parents might not be there when they get home from school because of ICE, the stronger the terrorist groups and the drug cartels that thrive in the darkness get. The more you make immigrant families and immigrant communities afraid, the more you make them afraid, right? Colonized. The more you make those folks afraid, the stronger the drug cartels, the stronger the criminal organizations get. You will not solve the problem with walls, and you won't solve the problem the way Joe Biden's solving it, by doing nothing. The answer is economic development. And that's really the answer to most of the problems. Folks, the goal of socialism and communism is to eventually reach the higher stage of communism, right? The first stage of communism is when you organize the economy for public good, not profit, production for social use, socialism. But the goal of socialism is with central planning and with economic development to raise living standards far beyond anything we can imagine. The goal is to totally eradicate poverty, totally eradicate scarcity, totally eradicate want, to the point that we don't even need a government, to the point that we don't need any form of coercion, to the point where we don't need organized wages even, to the point where we can have a society based upon from each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. Right? That is the goal of socialism, to build a world of so much vast abundance that scarcity is eliminated, inequality fades away, crime fades away, all oppression fades away. But the way to do that is with abundance. There is an economic basis for it, And we have to get beyond capitalism, which is an unsustainable system, which is an illogical system. We have to get past production organized for profit. It must be done. It's the necessity of our time. They know this in China. They know this in Russia. They know this in Vietnam and in Cuba. They know this in Iran. They know this in Nicaragua. They know this in Venezuela. People don't know it here. And we got a gang of hooligans out there who think if you want this, you're a neo-Nazi, you're a Nazgul, you're a red-brown, you're a Strasserist. Right? We got a gang of hooligans out there calling themselves communists that no one wants to listen to. And then we got a bunch of racist, fascist demagogues talking about crazy libertarian nonsense. Well, the city-building tendency needs to set up shop in America. Not to promote violence, not to promote anarchy, not to promote chaos, but to promote the opposite. To promote communities of solidarity. To promote the feeling of oneness and brotherhood, comradeship. The city-building tendency needs to reassert itself upon the soil of the United States, because only we have the answer to the crisis. Right? Only we understand that production for profit is outmoded. And that's what we're all about. So if you were wondering what we're all about, if you've heard me babbling on here and you think it's all just a bunch of inside baseball, go rewind the tape and listen to the past 75 minutes of my talking. I just explained to you my overall worldview, the city building tendency. I am a city builder. You are a city builder. And we are 21st century socialists, the present day incarnation of the city building tendency in our time. And we are marching forward, and no one is going to stop us because we have truth on our side. We have history on our side. We represent the way forward, and no one will stop us. So there you go. That is, I have laid it all out there. If you just listen to this, you know it all now. You know it all. You know what it's all about. So there you go. I gave you a basic overview of my beliefs and the beliefs of the Center for Political Innovation. What we advocate. We are the city building tendency. And we are going to rescue American socialism so that socialism can save America. We are going to defeat imperialism. We are going to save humanity from the nightmare of profits and command and an outmoded economic system. So there you go. And on that note, folks, be sure to hit the like button, be sure to hit the subscribe button, be sure to hit the notifications bell, and I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Rafael in Brazil is with us. Very good. Tamara and Dario from Brooklyn. Steve from Southwest Michigan. Chaya from Montreal. Mo in Toronto, Serbia. Cleveland Pirate Alex, Adam from Indiana, Ryan in Oakland, San Antonio, Texas, Tristan in Maryland, Albany, New York, Jenny Lynn, Santa Barbara, California, Marcos in Asheville, JT24, Quincy, Massachusetts, Clydebank, New Jersey, Alex Pugliese in Parsippany, New Jersey, Parasocialite, Jeff, Studio City, California, in Colorado, Seattle, Stephen in Seattle, Texas, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Netherlands, Sage from Fusion City, David Bendigo, Australia, good friend of the program. Great. You should check out David Fox's channel. He's doing a discussion of the CPI manual with Helen Woolley, and he's had guests on there. It's just really great. You should really check out David Fox's channel. Really good stuff. Detroit, Michigan, Anthony, Maine, USA, Danny in Illinois, Lithuania, Kansas City, Retail Hell. I'm sorry you're in Retail Hell, Red Illuminati, but enjoy the listening. You should check out his channel too. Red Illuminati is great. He's got some great commentary on there. Harry in Melbourne, Sarajevo, Helen Woolley in Melbourne. She's great as well. She's been doing some great commentary on David's channel. Great stuff. Mohsin from Iran, Glasgow, Scotland, Auckland, New Zealand, West Virginia, Ash in Calgary, Morgan in Indiana, San Antonio, Texas, Laura Floyd, Balthazar, Dirty Jers, is that New Jersey? Or Antoine from France, Solidarity Forever Comrades, Detroit, Tamara, Serbia, there you go, Pomona, California, Los Angeles, Temple City, California, how about DeSantis? There you go, John Witt in Houston, Belgium, Jordy in Belgium is with us. Anybody else? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Leipzig, East Germany. The center of the universe is everywhere. Alrighty. Alrighty then. The center of the universe is everywhere. Michigan, welcome. Welcome. A better America in Michigan, and that is what we want. We want a better America. West Virginia, AQK. Who else is with us tonight? Who else is with us? Anybody else? Anybody else want me to call them out as I see you? Name and location. We should have a caption, proud to be a city builder. Yeah. Well, I'm wearing the shirt that David Fox sent me, proud to be union, but we should have a proud to be city builder t-shirt. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was trying to get some t-shirts made for something, but it was too late. But yeah, we should have t-shirts soon. San Quentin, California, Tennessee. Very, very good. Very, very good. There you go. There you go. There you go. Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Geraldo from Brazil. Welcome, Geraldo. Glad you're watching. Be sure to hit the like button, folks. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Kendall in San Diego. Be sure to hit the notifications bell so you get notified when we're having these. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Denver, Colorado. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. We're having a great time here, folks. This is great. This is awesome. Tweet this out. Put it on your Twitter, on your Reddit, on your social media, on your Facebook. There you go. There you go. Like button, subscribe button. Let's get it out there. The more people that know about this stuff, the better off we are going to be, right? Sometimes it takes a while for things to build, right? There's quality into quantity sometimes, right? Sometimes all the little bits of work you do can build up into something big, but we just have to see, right? You know, Rome was not built in a day, they say, and that is certainly the truth. But we are marching ahead as a community. No one's going to stop us. No one is going to stop us. Okay, so now I have a number of super chats to answer, and if you want me to answer another question, be sure to just send in another super chat. We've got a number of very, very good super chats here, and I am going to answer them, so keep them rolling in. If you want me to answer a question, I will give you an answer. Jose Maria Sasson. The Communist Party People's War. Well, Jose Maria Sasson is the leader of one of the Philippine Maoist factions, probably the main Philippine Maoist faction. He's in exile, I believe. I forget what country he's in. The Netherlands, I think. He's in exile, and he, right? He is in exile. He's a Maoist communist, very critical of China, but he's been supportive of global fights against neoliberalism in the past. I used to follow his work a little more closely than I do now. I really haven't followed it, what's going on there. I know that there are some Filipinos in the chat who are very critical of Jose Maria Sasson, and they think he's sold out and all of that. I was very excited when Duterte first got elected. And, I was hoping that Duterte would lead to socialism. That didn't happen. But at the same time, Duterte is better than who was there before. I mean, Duterte is the first Philippine leader we've had in a long time who wasn't just a puppet of the United States. But I was hoping that Duterte might lead the Philippines towards socialism. That didn't happen. At the same time, Jose Maria Sasson, his faction, I believe they control a couple islands. They're like Maoist revolutionaries in the Philippines. And I really haven't kept up with them, honestly. At one point, I was paying very close attention to what his allies around the world were saying, and now I don't. So there you go. There you go. All right. Next question. Operation Uphold Democracy. I don't know what that is. Can someone remind me what that is? Right? I mean, can someone, I don't remember every operation. It was like, what was it like? Iraqi Freedom was the operation to invade Iraq. But which one is Operation Uphold Democracy? I don't remember. I don't remember these imperialist code words as well as I should. So if someone wants to remind me of what it is, I can comment on it. Ben Burgess, he's a Jacobin guy. We got into it because he was defending Anna Kasparian. So Anna Kasparian has launched this vicious hate campaign against Aaron Mate. Aaron Mate is somebody who has, exposed some of the lies about Syria, and that's an unforgivable crime. It's an unforgivable crime, according to people like Ben Burgess and Anna Kasparian, right? You're not allowed, to do that, And, Ben Burgess is saying, well, how do you know Anna Kasparian is pro-war? Well, she's waging a McCarthyite campaign against Aaron Mate. Plus, Young Turks was pretty supportive of the bombing of Libya and the destruction of Libya. Plus, Young Turks has been, beating the drum of hostility to Syria. Plus, Young Turks has singled out Tulsi Gabbard and tried to destroy her because she's running on an anti-war platform. Plus, listen to the attacks now that are being leveled against Aaron Mate. Look, and I just don't like it. I'm sorry. If you are like me, if you're an outspoken anti-imperialist, which I am, there is a relentless personal campaign to destroy your character, right? That is being waged by people. There is an endless personal war against anybody who is anti-imperialist and who believes in actual socialism, right? You can be part of the Jacobin cult. You can think socialism is just a pencil factory where, it's just cooperative pencil factories, right? You can do that. and you can believe that all the socialist countries are all evil, and you can support regime change in socialist countries, which Jacobin does. They've been documented to bring to their conferences speakers from anti-Nicaraguan and anti-Chinese movements and such. You can be a fake socialist, but if you're an actual socialist, if you defend existing socialist countries, you get smeared. And the main smear they run against you is they say that you're secretly a Nazi, which is a crazy claim. And I was going to court with police brutality victims when I was in Cleveland all the time, and I've marched for trans rights against the NYPD and their profiling of trans people. And maybe I've made mistakes in the past, but to claim that I'm actually a white supremacist, which is what these people claim, mind you. Vosh has said over and over again on his streams that I am a literal Nazi. Okay, that's what they've said. All right, now. Burgess is part of that Jacobin crowd. He's part of that Jacobin crowd. And so he comes at me, I never said that. I never said that. You're crazy. I never said that. Oh, okay. His best bud is the Surfs, who said, Surfing USA kid has said all kinds of nasty shit about me. After he debated, this very great commentator, very great commentator, Isha, who does a great podcast. After he debated her about Noam Chomsky, there were like mass reporting and targeting of her account to the point that like her podcast was almost shut down for a while. They're vicious. They're vicious. It's a good cop, bad cop routine. So Ben Burgess wants to be, I'm the good cop, but it's whatever. I don't care, and that's the thing. I don't care. It's whatever, look, it's whatever. And this, this internet fighting, Twitter is set up to encourage you to fight with people. Okay. It's set up to encourage you to fight with people. It's set up to encourage your negativity, and there's a clear divide on the left now, right? Aaron Mate versus Anna Kasparian. I know what side I'm on, right? When I start hearing a sadist, I start hearing, how dare you question chemical weapons allegations? You work for dictators. When I start hearing that, when I start hearing that, I immediately think, I know whose side I'm on, and when I hear people start saying, oh, you're a nasball, I know what side I'm on, and the campaign against me has been vicious, but it's not just me. I mean, look, they've gone after Isha, they've gone after Aaron Mate, they've gone after Max Blumenthal. Who else have they gone? Anybody, right? If you stand up and say, I don't want a war with Russia, they go after you. Right? And they're vicious, right? And so, Burgess and all of them are, oh, I didn't say that. Okay, whatever, whatever. Just go. Yeah, okay, whatever, And, he's grandstanding to his supporters. I never said, yeah, they do. Look at what they've said about Aaron Mate. Look at what they've said about Isha. Look what they've said about anybody, about Max Blumenthal, about Anya Parampil. These people are vicious, right? Their claim, and it's not just that we disagree with you, right? That would be normal. That's how normal people argue. They say, you know what? You said this, and I think you are wrong about that. That's how normal people argue. The way these people argue is, you disagree with me, and you are a Nazi. And let me add, it shouldn't be a surprise that this individual who's blocked me, that calls himself Socialism Done Left, and we're going to move on from this because no one wants to hear about Twitter drama between people they've never heard of. So we're going to move on from this after this. Not a surprise that we see them now supporting Joe Biden's domestic terrorism campaign, right? Joe Biden has launched the White House domestic terrorism agenda. All kinds of money going to the FBI and going to government agencies for the purpose of fighting, quote-unquote, disinformation on the internet. And basically, money is going to efforts to isolate and shut down and silence people with views that are critical of the United States, right? They are built a budget now. They've already got huge budgets in various places. They've built a budget now to try and basically silence people that go against the mainstream narrative, right? And of course, BreadTube people are supporting that. Why? And they're supporting that. And then their response is, oh, why are you critical of it? It only applies to white supremacists. Well, here's the thing, folks, and thank you, Joanne. These people, if you haven't noticed, think that all of us are white supremacists. Did you know that? Even though I went to court with police brutality victims for years, even though I risked my life on a ship trying to bring aid to Yemen, even though I've marched against the NYPD's policy against trans people, according to BreadTube, according to Vosh, I am a, quote, literal Nazi, and I am the same as a white supremacist. So, according to them, anybody who disagrees with them is a white supremacist. So, it only affects white supremacists. Everyone they disagree with is a white supremacist. And that is generally their policy, right? I mean, folks, I hate to beat this like a drum because it's like, it sounds too crazy to be true, right? It just sounds, you can't believe that people are this psychotic, okay? And I'm just going to end this part, Chinese healthcare system, right? I'm just going to end this segment by just pointing this out. Just pointing this out, okay? Right? And this needs to be said, okay? Right? If you're watching this right now, they want you dead. All right? I mean, I'm just telling you. I mean, they believe that what we advocate on here, our city building tendency in our program, makes you a Nazi. And that anyone who talks or interacts or, God forbid, platforms somebody like us is therefore a Nazi and deserves death. Okay? That's what they believe. These are highly psychotic and dangerous people. All right? They want you dead. Okay? Maybe you don't like me. You don't have to like me. You're watching this stream, so you probably do. But they want you dead. Okay? They don't just want you to change your mind. They want you dead. Okay? Think about that. They want you to die because you like my streams. Did you know that? They actually want to kill you. I can send you screenshots, right? I'm a Nazi, according to them. And anyone who associates with me or, God forbid, enjoys my work is therefore a Nazi enabler. And we all deserve to die. To die. That's what these people believe. That is what these people believe. And if you don't think that's dangerous, that Vosh, with all of the algorithms promoting him, is calling for all of us to die, if that doesn't scare you, if that doesn't make you uncomfortable, I mean, I don't know. That is, I don't want to kill Vosh. I don't, He's a jerk. I don't like him. I don't want to kill him. I think, if Vosh keeps doing his thing, I keep doing my thing, whatever. But Vosh gets on his streams and tells his supporters, Caleb's a literal Nazi. Caleb's a literal Nazi. And then 2 minutes later, it's, and if someone kills a Nazi, I'm okay with that. I mean, they want me dead. They want anyone who associates with me dead. Okay? Now, if you think that's okay, right? If you think that's okay, I mean, there's nothing more I can say, right? And thank you, Io. But this is why this is disturbing, right? This is very, very, very disturbing, right? And the synthetic left is toxic and dangerous. It's toxic and dangerous. It is extremely toxic and extremely dangerous. And there's a reason we have to stand up about this. The BreadTube book is coming out next week. It'll be available next week. It'll be up online for sale. It's done. It's done. I've seen it. It's, I'm loading the files. It's done. So the BreadTube book is done. And again, this is why I started the stream by saying this isn't inside baseball. This isn't inside baseball, right? I mean, it sounds like a bunch of people we've never heard of arguing with people that we've never heard of, right? That's what it sounds like, right? But at the end of the day, this matters, right? The fact that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are being cultivated to murder and kill leftists is a little bit dangerous, don't you think? Don't you think that's a little bit scary? Little scary, isn't it? The fact that Vosh is on there trying to incite people to kill us, right? The fact that ContraPoints has a whole video that says, that, someone's a fascist if they use this hand sign or that hand sign. These people are very dangerous, okay? And, I mean, I can keep repeating myself. I do repeat myself a lot, and some people find that to be very annoying. So I'm going to stop repeating myself on this point, because if I haven't gotten through to you yet, there's nothing more I can say. This stuff is very, very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And I know people are in the chat and saying, it's not dangerous. Look, I went to go support the students at at the cafeteria at New School University. A group of students, Maoists, anarchists, Trotskyites, went to go occupy their cafeteria. I went to New School to support them, and I was told that I had to leave because I was a fascist. All right? That happened. That was in 2018, right? I've been out on the street, reporting, and I've had people I've never met before walk up to me and start shouting at me about, oh, I know who you are. You work with Dugan, and I heard about you. And I've had random people I've never met walk up to me and start screaming at me that I'm a closet white supremacist. Okay, the left forum didn't happen this year. All right, it's the Haitian coup. Okay, all right, we'll write that down. Haitian coup. I don't know if I would be welcome at the left forum. I don't know if it would be safe for me to go to the left forum at this point. There are so many people who've decided that I am a white supremacist, and that's very scary to me. It's very scary, and I worry about my wife's safety also. I worry about my wife's safety. She gets weird messages from people. She gets harassed all the time. And, she's not doing political stuff the way I am at all. I mean, she does her own thing. She fights for the rights of domestic workers. She's a nanny. She works with children, and these people have targeted her, right? These people are evil, okay? Ben Burgess, Vosh, Skippy the Bear. These people are evil, okay? And don't think that they're not, you want to say, oh, it's just a tit for tat. No, these are evil people. These are vicious, evil people. Okay, and I probably sound a little alarmist by saying that. These are vicious, evil people. Read about Indonesia, right? Indonesia, there was God forbid, a tankie was the president, and the CIA overthrew the government, and they murdered 500,000 people. And there were so many dead bodies that the rivers in 1965 in Indonesia got clogged. And these people basically are for imperialism. They would have thought, oh, that guy's a tankie, that's okay. These are vicious, evil people. These are vicious, vicious, evil people. And, anyway, moving on. Not important, right? Not what everyone came on here to hear. But look, these people are evil. Again, I don't want to kill them, Ben Burgess, I don't like him. I don't want to kill him. And I'm not telling people he's a Nazi, right? Vosh, don't like him. He ain't a Nazi, though. I'm not trying to kill him, right? These people are very, very, very dangerous, okay? That's all I can say. That's all I can say, right? They're very, very dangerous. They are motivated by anti-communism, and they think that all Aaron Mate and me and Anya Parampil and Max Blumenthal and, blackagendareport.com, that we're all Nazis and worthy of death. And if that doesn't bother you on some level, I don't know what to say. There's a guy named Alex Reed Ross who has written articles for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that are worded very carefully to try and make it sound like I'm a white supremacist. Be very careful. All right, next point. Fusion energy. Big promoter of fusion energy. The biggest promoter of fusion energy is China. China is the biggest promoter of fusion energy at this point. Keep attracting hate, right? Thank you very much, David. Yeah, China is the biggest promoter of fusion energy. Read about the artificial sun. China is one of the biggest supporters of fusion energy. But you know what? Iran has been doing fusion energy, funding and research for years. In fact, I got to go interview Dr. Eric Lerner, who is the head of the fusion energy research of New Jersey. And that was back in 2014, 2015. I got to go to his facility in New Jersey. Beautiful, beautiful fusion energy facility. And he talked about how he was collaborating with a lab in Iran, and how the sanctions made it hard for him to collaborate with this lab in Iran. Fusion energy, Iran is supporting it, China is supporting it. Yeah, the developing countries of the world know that imperialism is propping itself up by its global monopoly on oil. Okay? And that's the situation. All righty. Very good. All right. Oliver Cromwell, Robespierre, and Lenin. So and thank you, Andre. Oliver Cromwell, and I do appreciate it, Andre. Oliver Cromwell, he was a leader of the English Civil War, right? So in the English Civil War, you had the Cavaliers and the Roundheads, right? The Cavaliers supported the English monarchy and feudalism. the Roundheads, they supported the Parliament, right? You had the Parliament and the King had a falling out, right? King Charles, he was having a falling out with the Parliament, so there was a war between the King and the Parliament. And the Royalists, they were based in the rural areas, and they were pretty pro-feudal, and they were supporting the Church of England. How is liberal sign? Democratic and illiberal. All right. Okay. Writing it down. So, Oliver Cromwell, he was this landowning guy who had some kind of psychological breakdown and became a religious fanatic and a Puritan, and was a fanatical supporter of the Parliament in the English Civil War. And he was a very effective military leader, and he built a political army to defeat the Royalists. And he was very effective on the battlefield. And eventually the Royalists were defeated. The Cavaliers were defeated, and they beheaded King Charles, right? The King of England had his head cut off. And Oliver Cromwell became Lord and Protector of England. He was the dictator of England, and it was a Puritan government. The Puritan regime came in, and they were fanatical Protestants that came to rule England, and Oliver Cromwell was the leader of them, and he was a bourgeois revolutionary. It was the urban capitalists who were Protestant religious fanatics fighting the Church of England, which they viewed as being too Catholic. But it was mainly a struggle between the remnants of feudalism and the emerging British capitalist class. And Oliver Cromwell was the fanatical fighter for the English bourgeoisie. And he was deeply, deeply conservative. He didn't like theater. He didn't like music and dancing. He didn't like Christmas dinner. He was a deeply, deeply religious man, deeply, very, very, very socially conservative. And he was a genocidal murderer of the Irish, right? Because the Irish were Catholic, he committed genocide against them. But he was very charismatic, and he built a very political army, right? Because the Cavaliers, because most of the population at that point was in the countryside, and, the Cavaliers and the Royalists had the upper hand. So in order for the bourgeoisie to defeat the remnants of feudalism, they had to build a highly political army. And I've talked at great length about the English Civil War before, because I recently started studying it, and I had never studied it before, and I found it to be fascinating. But yeah, the English Civil War, it's a fascinating event, and Oliver Cromwell was the fanatical religious leader of the Parliament side, who eventually became the dictator of Britain. And now he's remembered. He's not remembered very well in English history. There is a painting of him at a university, and there is curtains near it, because anytime a member of the royal family visits this college, they have to put the curtains over it, because he cut off one of their family members' head. Right? He killed a king. And the death of King Charles, the execution, you want a CPI mug? Well, there you go, Eduardo. The execution of King Charles is considered a martyrdom by the English, the Church of England, the Anglican Church. So he was, again, it was a kind of a situation where a revolution, the bourgeoisie, as they were coming to power, things got very intense. And then afterwards, there was a Thermidor where the Church of England came back. Capitalist property relations did not change, but things cooled down. Oliver Cromwell was, considered to be an extremist, and, he's not remembered very well in English history, but he, you couldn't have overthrown feudalism completely without him. You needed Oliver Cromwell, right? You needed that fanatic, right? It was the terror, right? And the French Revolution. So Robespierre, right? You had the French Revolution. The bourgeoisie of France overthrows the church and the monarchy, and establishes a national assembly. And Robespierre was one of the fanatics of the French Revolution. But unlike Oliver Cromwell, he was an atheist. He did not believe in any religion. The French Revolution began. They did not believe in religion. They believed in science and reason. And they converted all the churches to temples of reason. They executed priests for defending the corrupt monarchy. You had Robespierre, you had Danton, you had John Paul Marat, who was the agitator and the pamphleteer. And it was, the French Revolution to overturn feudalism. And again, Robespierre eventually got executed, right? And the Reign of Terror came to an end. And eventually you had Napoleon marching into power. And Napoleon brought back the Catholic Church. And Napoleon, had military rule, declared himself to be emperor. But the property relations stayed the same. The revolution often goes according to, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And that's how these things work, right? That if the French Revolution had just stayed in the reign of terror, eventually feudalism would have overtaken it. You had to take a step backwards. And the Bolshevik Revolution, even though it was a proletarian revolution, tariffs, all right, even though it was a proletarian revolution, right? It went through a similar phase, right? You had the immediate aftermath of the Russian Revolution, you had the Civil War, and you had the Bolsheviks, and then you had, the rise of Stalin, which was in some cases a step back. A lot of things that the Soviet government did were a compromise with the old system. Stalin brought back the Russian Orthodox Church during World War II. Stalin outlawed abortion, and he outlawed gay marriage. Stalin promoted, the Soviet family. Stalin made movies glorifying the czars, the Ivan the Terrible and Alexander Nevsky and stuff. And in some ways, you're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. In some ways, the Tsar, in some ways, the Stalin regime, the Stalin government was a compromise with the old society. But property relations remained the same, right? Property relations remained the same, right? The means of production operated according to public good, not profits, right? There was a communist party that was based in neighborhoods and communities that was in charge. There were Soviets and workers' councils. So, the Soviet Union, even though it had a thermidor, like when Robespierre was executed, it still, it didn't change the property relations. And this is, there's a very good book called The Anatomy of a Revolution. It's written by an anti-communist. It's a pretty anti-communist book, but it analyzes the revolutionary process, right? The English Civil War, the French Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, the Soviet Revolution. Revolutions tend to go through stages, right? They tend to go through stages, right? But nowadays, well, anyway, next point. All right. Okay. Okay. A 7-day plan to invade West Germany. I don't know anything about it. I have not studied West German history enough to comment on that. But, all kinds of propaganda was, the Soviets were never going to invade the West, okay? In fact, if you look throughout the post-World War II years, the Soviets were constantly giving up power. In France, after the Second World War, you'll remember the Communist Party won all kinds of seats in parliament and then stepped down so that France could get aid from the Marshall Plan. The U.S. government said, hey, France, if you have communists in your government, you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to get any aid. So the communists willingly stepped down. In Greece, there was a similar situation where communists, gave up power, right? And, all throughout Europe, you saw situations. It wasn't like the Soviets were on the brink of, marching into Western Europe. It wasn't that at all. It was the opposite. You saw many places where the Soviet Union and its allies had the upper hand. You saw them voluntarily giving up power. And the Trotskyites would criticize them for it, right? I mean, in China, it's not Western Europe, but in China, Mao desperately tried to form a coalition government with Chiang Kai-shek. Mao bent over backwards to accommodate Chiang Kai-shek, right? There's a Trotskyite book called The Mao Myth, where they jokingly say that Mao was standing, as Chiang Kai-shek was fleeing to Taiwan, Mao was standing on the mainland shouting, please come back and form a unified government with me. Well, Mao was doing that, and that was the correct thing to do, because the civil wars are not a good thing, folks. Mao wanted to form a unified government with Chiang Kai-shek. The French communists stepped down from the government after World War II. Many places, the Soviet Union could have flexed its muscles, but didn't, because they didn't want a new world war. Politics of Bob Dylan. So, there you go. And that's not the version of events you get from NATO theoreticians and stuff, but that's the reality, right? That the Soviet Union, in many cases, could have flexed its muscles and didn't, because they didn't want a new world war. All right, next point. All right. The Marxist concept of overproduction, why is it so misunderstood? Because it doesn't fit, synthetic leftist ideology. Okay, so I'll check out the documentary on North Korea. Thank you for the super chat. I haven't seen that particular film. The best documentaries on North Korea I've seen were, Crossing the Line was a good documentary about Joseph Dresnok. And there are some other good ones about, there's one about the gymnastics athletes. It's pretty good. But anyway, all right. The Marxist concept of overproduction. Why is it not widely understood? Because it flies in the face of this, right? The problem of overproduction can only be resolved with a centrally planned economy. if you don't believe in a centrally planned economy, you can't understand overproduction, right? And it's pretty basic Marxism, right? And soapbox agitators. It was the most common thing, right? In the 30s, 40s, 50s, even up into the 60s. Someone stand on a soapbox and say, under capitalism, people are homeless because there's too many houses. People are hungry because there's too much food, right? That was overproduction. That was poverty amid plenty. That's just a basic critique of capitalism. But it's been obscured by the synthetic left, So, yeah, I mean, it's weird because it's everywhere. Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific by Friedrich Engels. The whole third chapter is devoted to nothing but that concept. It's a 3-chapter book. Chapter 3 is pretty much all about the problem of overproduction. But, yeah, it's been obscured. Read The Poverty of Philosophy by Karl Marx. It's all about this, but they've obscured it because it's something people don't want to hear. But it's very, 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 very important to talk about in our time because of the computer revolution. It's pretty basic. Nelson Peary talks about it. Very good writing. Harpal Brar, the communist leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, he talks about it. Fred Goldstein talks about it. Sam Marcy talks about it. High Tech, Low Pay, he talks about it. Serious Marxists talk about it. The Communist Party of the 1930s certainly talked about it. If you read any William Z. Foster, he talks about it. But yeah, non-Marxist-Leninists have just given up on this part of, this critique of capitalism because if you don't advocate a socialist system, you don't want to talk about it. Right? And if you think the Soviet Union wasn't really socialist, if you think China wasn't really socialist, how have they overcome this problem? Right? I mean, that's one thing. All these people that say Soviet Union was capitalist, China is capitalist, how come they didn't have this problem? How come they did not have gluts of overproduction? How come they had unending economic growth? Even as they were having problems, even as their growth rates slowed, their economic growth was constant. How did they not have this problem? Because they didn't have the problem of overproduction, right? China does not have this problem. Soviet Union did not have this problem, right? Cuba doesn't have this problem, right? Socialist countries don't have the problem of overproduction. And if you can understand what capitalism is, and if you can understand that capitalism has the problem of overproduction, you have to admit that there are non-capitalist societies around the world that don't have this problem. So there you go. All right. All right. Next question. The CIA and the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, the Council on Foreign Relations goes back to Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes was, the father of Rhodesia, right? The settler colonial state, the apartheid state. After it got its freedom, it was called Zimbabwe. He started the Rhodes Scholar Program. That's, and most of the big names in Washington, D.C., Bill Clinton, all these people are Rhodes Scholars. The Rhodes Scholarship Program, this is how they cultivate people. And, when he died, Cecil Rhodes left money in his will for the creation of, it's kind of funny actually, for the creation of a secret society to promote the ideals of the British Empire. Well, when you hear secret society, you think, decoder rings and stuff like that. But, what came out of that? The money from his will was used to set up something called the Round Table Group. And it was in New York City, and it was in London, and it was a group of intellectuals who got together, and they had funding from Rhodes' estate, and they talked about the problems of the world and the need to promote the ideals of the British Empire. And the ideals of the British Empire were the economic theories of Adam Smith. Those were the problems. The theories of Adam Smith. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. I need to write down Korean War protests. All right. And, the British Empire was the main promoter of economic liberalism. Okay. Sorry. Writing down the super chats as they come in. Proletarian. Patriotism. Reactionary. So, there you go. And the Round Table Group was established. It was a group of intellectuals promoting the ideals of the British Empire, economic freedom, capitalism, liberalism, liberal democratic society. Out of the Round Table Group, eventually the Rockefellers got involved, and there was another body, I can't remember, and finally you had the New York Council on Foreign Relations, and now you have the Council on Foreign Relations. I mean, you can read their publication Foreign Affairs, which is their publication. It comes out every month. It's a very good magazine that gives you their perspective on events, which I read it regularly because I don't agree with it, obviously. But I read it because it's important to know what they're putting out there and what they believe. And it's important to understand their analysis. And it's been very useful to me. I tend to believe the opposite of what they believe, but it's good to know what your opponents think and how they're analyzing things. Look, Yemen. I saw Joe Biden's shift in tone on Yemen coming a mile away, right? A mile away. So there you go. And yeah, I mean, the CIA doesn't think of it. The CIA are not, the CIA is a functional organization, right? They get shit done. They're the intelligence agency. I've joked before that intelligence agencies are like producers. I don't know if you've ever heard this before. Intelligence agencies are kind of like producers, right? If you work in TV production, the producer doesn't write it, the writer does. The producer doesn't direct it, the director does. The producer is not on screen. That's the talent or the actor, the reporter. They're on screen. They don't film it. The cameraman does. The intelligence agencies just kind of bring things together and make things happen, right? And the way it works with American intelligence is that the CIA doesn't pay for it. The National Endowment for Democracy pays for it. The Ford Foundation pays for it. The Rockefeller Foundations pay for it. The Open Society Institute pays for it. Okay? The CIA doesn't think up what to do. The Council on Foreign Relations thinks up what to do, right? And who does it? Who does it? Well, there's a collection of people who do it. There's a lot of dupes in the media who do it. There's a lot of fake activist groups who do it. There's a lot of, U.S. stooges around the world who do it. The CIA just kind of make things happen. And, the Council on Foreign Relations are the academics who think of it. So they're not part of the CIA. They are a private nonprofit paid for by Rockefeller money, by ExxonMobil, by the Ford Foundation. Read their funders. It's like an encyclopedia of arms manufacturers and Raytheon and Boeing, but read the funding of the Council on Foreign Relations. They think of it. And they're very closed and secretive meetings, right? I knew somebody who worked there, and he talked about how it was